Hey everybody, welcome to this video tutorial. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. Today I want to talk about the 10 best and the 10 worst features in Photoshop. Now, obviously they're my personal 10 best and 10 worst features in Photoshop, but I really tried to think through this and get sort of the best and the worst features, whether you're a photographer or a graphic designer using Photoshop. There's a ton of great stuff in Photoshop. I really had to whittle my list down, and actually, honestly, it was a little bit of a struggle to come up with 10 really bad things about Photoshop. I think you might be impressed when you see the list of the 10 worst things, because they're really not all that bad. They are annoying, don't get me wrong, but they're really not that bad. So without further ado, let's jump into Photoshop. Alright, now the first and the number one feature in Photoshop, as I have contended for quite some time, is curves. I think just overall it is the most powerful, earth-shattering feature in Photoshop. You can find it up here under Image, Adjustments, Curves. We got this image here of this monastery or whatever it is, convent maybe, and we need to increase contrast, no big deal. Pull down, make a little S-curve here, and voila, we have increased contrast. Oh, but the client says, whoop, wrong thing, here under channels, oh, but the client says there's not enough cyan in the image. Well, voila, we can drop some cyan in there. Maybe they need a little bit more green, boom, throw more green in there, or maybe they need more yellow. Yellow is the opposite of blue, so we pull down on blue, it's going to pump some yellow into there, or maybe they need more blue. We pull up on blue, and we get more blue. There's so much you can do with curves. You've got this histogram overlay. I have an entire tutorial that I did. I've done several tutorials on curves, but my most recent one is one you should check out. In fact, as I go through this, maybe I'll include links to every feature that I've done a full tutorial on so you can really check them out in depth. But curves, my number one favorite feature in Photoshop. Now, over here and on to image number two. My second favorite feature in Photoshop is Smart Objects. Smart Objects are amazing. They allow you to take the graphic or graphics or image like this that you have on screen, bundle it up, and sort of lock it in. So you can see here I've got this background image. I'm just going to right click on it and choose Convert to Smart Object. That's how you get your first Smart Object for the most part. Go ahead and hit Convert to Smart Object. All right, you can see we get that little icon. It's now a Smart Object. Well, what we can do at this point is we can do something like Command or Control T to bring up our free transform handles. And I'm just going to tell Photoshop, look, set the width of this to 10% of the original image and also the height to 10% of the original image. Commit that change, and we have a much smaller image. Now, typically, if this was not a smart object, let's go back to Command or Control T, and let's set this back. Well, first of all, notice that it's remembering that, hey, this is only a 10% width and height change. This is not the original 100% of the image, so we can say, look, Photoshop, go back to 100% of the image, and the entire image is preserved. It brings us back. We have all the sharpness, clarity, and detail of our original image because it's a smart object. We can copy smart objects across multiple files even, and if you double-click on a smart object, it's going to open up a .psb file. You can see here layer0.psb, and this is sort of the guts of the smart object. You can apply layers within a smart object, build out almost like individual files, and the cool thing is, if let's say we have 5 of this smart object placed over here in our document, right, and you go into the PSB and you edit it and you say like, I just want a big black mark across it, right, and then you save the PSB back over on our original file, it's going to have the big black mark, and in every other file where this smart object is placed. So that's pretty cool. I am going to undo that though, and I'm going to save that. I'm just going to close the PSB, and there we go. We're back to our just b.jpg, and you can see here's our image. One of the other great things about smart objects is that filters become non-destructive. You can go in and you can edit them, you can get rid of them, you can mask them. So if we say, look, let's go pixelate and mosaic, right? We're just going to have a little bit of fun. We'll do kind of this crazy 60 square cell size. Go ahead and hit OK. And then we realize, you know what, that kind of destroys the integrity of the image. We can hit this little drop down, and number one, we can just hit the eyeball and turn the whole thing off temporarily. We can always delete it. We can double click it, which will bring up the dialog and allow us to change the cell size, make it bigger or smaller, all right? You can also hit the little double slider here, and you can reduce the opacity of the effect, which is kind of neat, or you can apply a blend mode. So if we go like overlay, it's going to give us this high contrast, kind of crazy looking effect. All right, so that's all kind of cool. You can hit OK, but also you can just straight up mask the effect. Now we're going to talk about masks in a moment because that's another one of the great features of Photoshop. But like it's just a white mask. So if we grab the brush tool and we're painting with the color black, we can do something like just go in here and paint away all of the, mosaic-ness over here above the church building and maybe on some of the hill behind it. So smart filters within or attached to smart objects are amazing. Smart objects basically allow you to work non-destructively in Photoshop, and they're incredible because of that. Now, just a quick note, some of the downsides or perceived downsides of smart objects are, if I just select the smart object, I can't paint on it. See how the paintbrush is just the little cross icon? I can't paint, and if I click, it's going to say, look, you can't, the smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Edit contents will no longer be available, blah, blah, blah. The main and most important point here is when you rasterize a smart object, you lose your smart filter. You don't lose it. It's just sort of applied to the image, and it's no longer a smart object. So if I hit OK, you're going to look and see we still have our filter, but there's nothing there. And more importantly, if I go and I like size this image way down, all right, and I commit it, and I'm like, oh, shoot, you know what? I actually need to size that back up, and I size it way back up. Look at how much detail we've lost. It's a big blurry mess now because we don't have the smart object locking everything in. Smart objects, insanely powerful. There is no reason you shouldn't be using them, whether you're a photographer or a web designer or a graphic designer. If you're using Photoshop, you should be using smart objects. Now the next thing up, and the next thing that I want to talk about, are adjustment layers. Adjustment layers are one of my personal favorites as well, up there with curves. Adjustment layers are amazing because they are the epitome of non-destructive editing in Photoshop. They allow you, instead of applying your curves directly to your image, they allow you to stack it on a layer above your original image, so you never actually edit the original image or do any damage to the original image. You isolate the curves onto its own adjustment layer, then you can apply the curves, and those curves sort of trickle down. Imagine like pouring a paint bucket down your layers panel. Well, that's what curves is doing. It's pouring a paint bucket down your layers panel and applying that curves adjustment to every layer beneath it. But you can also mask that specific adjustment layer, and again, we haven't touched on masking yet, I know. You can apply a blend mode, you can reduce opacity and really dial your setting in, and most importantly, you can go back a day, a month, a year later, and you can readjust that curves adjustment layer and maybe change the tone curve a little bit, or maybe add a little bit more red or green or blue or whatever you need to do. Let's check it out. So adjustment layers are simple. You just go Window, Adjustments. I already have my Adjustments panel open, and it's this guy right here. Now, these are all of our adjustment layers. You can also see the adjustment layers by going Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and we have all these different adjustment layers. All right, this may be easier to begin with because you can see, oh, look, there's vibrance, or there's curves, levels, etc., etc., etc. All of these different icons represent one of them. So brightness, contrast, levels, curves, yada, yada, yada. Let's go with vibrance. That's a pretty simple adjustment layer. And you can see when I apply an adjustment layer, I get a layer above my original layer, and I've got some sliders. So this is pretty simple. Increase vibrance. Let's go ahead and increase saturation. And there we go. Just like that. Now, if I come back, 6 hours later after I've saved the image, I've closed it, I've reopened it, I don't like it, I can shut it off. I can just go ahead and reduce the opacity. I can go ahead and mask something in. Maybe I really only want to increase the vibrance or saturation up here in this part of the image, right? If I wanted to do that, select the mask, fill it with black, go Edit Fill, and we'll just choose to fill this sucker with black, hit OK. I'm going to move the Adjustments panel back where it belongs. And then I can take my brush tool and paint with the color white and paint over this part of the sky where I want to apply that vibrance and saturation adjustment. You can see there it is. There's before, there's after. So adjustment layers are incredibly powerful. I cannot overstate them enough. I can't overstate them, period, I should say. They're insanely powerful and incredibly useful. Now the next feature is the pen tool. The pen tool, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because again I've done many tutorials on this tool, but it is a path drawing tool, and it is quite possibly the single most powerful selection tool in Photoshop. It allows you to create incredibly precise and very editable selections. And oh, by the way, over here in the Paths panel, you can save the path, so you can always load the selection later. You can just hold down your Command or Control key and click on that work path, load it as a selection, Command or Control D to deselect, and look, hey, we can always reload it as a selection right there. So that's pretty cool. The pen tool and how it works, oh, by the way, you can draw shapes as well, or just straight up pixels. And again, a tutorial, a little link appeared up in the corner, and I talk about all this stuff in the tutorials I've done on the pen tool. It is an absolute must-know tool if you're a web designer or an image retoucher in Photoshop. Ridiculously useful. So segueing beautifully off of the pen tool discussion, one of the things that I do love about Photoshop, and this is more of an abstract concept of Photoshop and not necessarily a specific tool, is the fact that you can save a selection. So of course you can draw a path and it's going to appear on the Paths panel as we just saw, but you can also just save a straight up selection. So if we go like a quick selection tool, and we're just going to do a very rough selection here over this helicopter, all right, something like this, and we decide, you know what? that's close enough. That's an okay selection. It's actually not. It's an awful selection, but we don't have time. All right, so let's say we have this awful selection of this helicopter, and we realize, you know what? I actually want to go down here and increase the contrast down here before I mess around with the helicopter at all. But I've got this amazing precise selection that I spent maybe, 5, 10, 20, sometimes an hour creating a selection. So instead of just hitting, Command or Control D to deselect and get rid of it, I'm going to undo to bring my selection back. You can right-click within your selection and just choose to save the selection. Now, Photoshop is going to save the selection as a channel. So we can just call this heli for helicopter, okay. And if we go over to our channels panel, there it is. The selection has been saved. And again, just like with the paths panel, just Command or Control click on that channel to load the selection, or you can always go select and choose load selection, and then choose the channel which you want to load. In this case, we just have one that we've created, and it's heli. Great. Hit OK, and it loads the selection. Now, once you've created selections, once you've decided that you've got selections that you want, whether you've created them with a pen tool or a quick selection tool, and maybe even saved them for use later on, you're probably going to want to use these selections at least part of the time to create masks. Masks allow us to apply an effect or only show part of an image at any given time. Let's take a look at masking right here, right now. So here, we're going to move over to this next image, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask which is going to isolate these canoes and allow me to change the color just of these canoes. Now, is there a better way to change the color of these canoes? Absolutely, but it's not going to help us explain the idea of masks any better. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go select color range, and I am going to choose none here for the selection preview. I'm going to just click on these canoes, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and I'm going to click across them a couple times, and it's going to sort of pick up all the red that's in this image. Right? You can see our selection kind of sort of being built out a little bit by Photoshop. I'm just going to move over this, and we can increase the fuzziness a little bit to just kind of bring that selection, I don't know, as perfectly as we can. And the nice thing about color range is it's even going to pick up the canoe down there in the water. Go ahead and hit OK. And we have a general selection here of our canoes, all right? It's not perfect, but don't worry about that. Again, this is just an example, We're going to go select, and we're going to save this selection, and we're just going to call this, let's call it color. What am I thinking? We're going to call this color because we're going to change the color. It's pretty much the only real vibrant color in the photo here. Now what we're going to do is load a hue saturation adjustment layer, right? We've talked about adjustment layers. Sure enough, we have a mask. Now what we want to do here with our hue saturation adjustment layer is just shift the hue. So let's just take it this way. Okay, there we get some green canoes. Maybe we want the canoes to be more like blue or something like that. All right, so there we go. Blue, a little too vibrant, so let's knock down the little saturation a little bit. Maybe increase the... Nah, I'm not going to mess with the brightness. Just going to leave the brightness at 0. All right, so we've got our hue saturation. That's great. So now what we do is we select the mask, and we need to fill the mask with black. See, the mask right now for this adjustment layer is white, which means everything is showing, right? If I just select the mask, and the hotkey to quickly flip it from black to white is Command or Control I. Just, inverts the white, and the opposite of white is black, so boom, it's all covered up. Now what we can do, go to our channels panel, and Command or Control click on our color channel there, and then go back to our adjustment layer. Make sure, by the way, see the default is to select the layer, and you can see the little white marks. That means you have the hue saturation layer selected. We actually want to make sure we select the mask, and we're going to fill this bit of the mask with white. So we're going to go Edit, Fill, and then choose Contents, White, hit OK, and then hit Command or Control D, and you can see that our canoes have been changed to the color purple, and our hue saturation adjustment layer is only affecting that part of the image we selected. Now we can see it's not nearly a perfect selection, but again, that wasn't the point of this little exercise. This is to show you how masking works. Now, you can apply a mask to any layer you like, so if we just create a new layer here, we can just hit the new layer icon. You can always add a layer mask by hitting the little Add Layer Mask icon right down here. And then voila, we have, right there, we have a single layer mask applied to a layer. So anytime you need to mask something or constrict it to a certain area of the image, masks are your friend, and that's how you use them. Easily one of the most useful and powerful features in Photoshop. So moving right off of masks, I want to talk about quick masks and the quick mask mode. One of my personal favorites. It's the ability basically to paint a selection. And sometimes it can be tricky because if you know about masks, you're like, oh, well, this is just to hide stuff or not hide stuff. Quick mask, right? No. Don't think about quick mask mode that way. Think about quick mask mode in terms of painting a selection. That's all you do with quick mask mode. So It actually might be nice if Adobe would change the name of it, speaking of best/worst things. Quick Mask Mode, you can click this little icon right here. In fact, one of the things I like to do before I even start using Quick Mask Mode is double-click the Quick Mask Mode icon and make sure that I have color indicates set to selected areas. This means that the areas that I paint, those are going to be the areas that are selected. Masked areas, the areas you paint, are the only areas that aren't selected. So it's a little kind of counterintuitive if you use it the way that I use it. So I'm going to grab the brush tool, and we're going to turn on Quick Mask Mode, right? And our two color choices are black or white. We're going to paint with black. I'm going to make my brush tool a little bit smaller. You can right-click and just downsize it. I'm going to downsize it actually a little bit more than this. And we'll just quickly paint over this camera here. It's going to be a rough selection, but it's a very quick and dirty way to go in and get a selection of something like this. And because we have a soft-edged brush, the edges of our selection are going to be as soft as our brush. So that's all kind of cool. You can use a hard-edged brush. And by the way, if you don't know how to get a hard-edged brush, right-click, crank the hardness up. It's going to give you a nice sharp edge to your selection. All right, once you have your area selected, simply hit the letter Q. And by the way, the letter Q will bring you into Quick Mask Mode, and it takes you out of Quick Mask Mode. And in this case, when you jump out of Quick Mask Mode, it's going to load the selection that you painted. So go ahead and hit the letter Q, and you can see, voila, loaded our selection. All right, once we've done that, we can do something like, I don't know, Command or Control J, pop the camera up onto a new layer or a copy of it, and we can drag it right over. So you can see we quickly made a selection with Quick Mask Mode. It's an amazing little tool when you need to go in and quickly paint and create a selection just like that. By the way, it does help to have a Wacom tablet or really a tablet of any kind that works well for quickly going in with a Quick Mask Mode and grabbing selections. It's just really nice to have one of these things. Now, next up, I want to talk about the Rotate View tool. Rotate View tool is super cool. Let's say we needed to paint a line along the top of this ridge here. Maybe we change the color of the sky or something, and then the sky is now green and purple, or maybe that's not too realistic. Something like this. I don't know, whatever. And we flip the mask and make it solid black, and we just want to paint that color in just along this ridge line. Well, see, sometimes when I'm painting with the brush tool, I tend to like to paint up and down, not side to side. Side to side to me doesn't feel, I don't know, it doesn't feel the same. I don't feel like I have the same level of precision. This is where I love the Rotate View tool. Note the hotkey is the letter R. It's right here underneath the hand tool. If you click and hold on the hand tool, choose Rotate View tool. And what you can do is you can drag your image and just rotate the entire view. Now, this has not actually rotated the image. In fact, if I were to do something like save for the web, you're going to see here, and it's a massive image which is trying to save for the web, the image is still straight. We haven't actually rotated the image. This is not like going to, image rotation and choosing, one of these options or arbitrary and setting it to, some pixel count, some degree count. This is just rotating your view of the image. And then I could come in here and quickly paint along the ridge, whatever's easiest for me. Hit the letter R, go back to the Rotate View tool, choose to reset the view, boom, pops me right back to the straightened image, and I can move on and finish retouching my image, save it out, and all is good with the world. I love this tool because it's so fast, it's so easy, and it really helps, especially, I should say, this tool, especially when I'm retouching, moving along the contour of somebody's face, cutting out hair, anything where I'm moving in close and getting and really checking out the details. The Rotate View tool, incredible. Now, one of the other features that I really like, and this is maybe sort of an unsung hero, it's more of a pet peeve of mine. When you zoom in on an image in Photoshop, I'm just going to zoom in, just Command or Control and plus. Hold down the spacebar, and you can move around with the hand tool. In fact, you can move the image till you see almost none of it on screen. That's pretty cool. Now, one of the things that you can't do is when you have the image zoomed out, right, where you're not zoomed in beyond what the Photoshop UI or Photoshop canvas can handle, hold down the spacebar key, you can't move your image around. I sometimes like to be able to move the image around because maybe I have a big graphic placed in the corner and I go free transform it. All right, I create a big red blob here and then I size that red blob up. This is going to be a better example. And then I rotate that red blob and I move that red blob over, something like that, right? And then I'm zooming in and I'm working on this image and I decide, you know what? I want to free transform this blob again. Well, you can see the only free transform handle I can see is right here and I can't move my image to see anything else. So the only option I'm left with is zooming way out and trying to work with my big transform handle this way. So then I can just, kind of scale it down a little bit. And there we go. Well, this feature in Photoshop, now that I've described the problem, we go Photoshop, or if you're on Windows, you go Edit, Preferences, Photoshop, Preferences, and we go down here to Tools. There it is right there, Tools. And in Tools, we tick on Overscroll. Go ahead and hit OK. Now that we have Overscroll turned on, you can see that even when I'm not zoomed in, I can move my image anywhere on the canvas. I love this, particularly when I'm trying to check out the image pretty large, and I decide, you know what, I need to change this. See, I can adjust my image so I can see the full transform handles. I can like right-click, I can choose distort, and I can skew and distort my little graphic or whatever it is, any which way I like. This is just a personal thing that I absolutely love about Photoshop. It's one of those little things that I find so helpful, and I thought this would be a perfect time to share it with you guys. Overscroll in the Preferences menu. You're going to love it. Have you ever used Smart Guides in Photoshop? Because that's the number 10 thing on my list of the 10 best things in Photoshop. Smart Guides, and even like the pixel precision. You get a pixel grid, things like that. Let's check it out real quick. Number one, if we go up to View and we turn on Show Pixel Grid, the pixel grid doesn't appear right away. The pixel grid only appears when you zoom way into your image, and then you can see the pixel grid. Pixel grid obviously is going to be much more useful for web designers, graphic designers, even some UI designers if you find that you can even use Photoshop for that kind of thing. It's really helpful for just getting things aligned and quite frankly, pixel perfect. Sometimes Photoshop applies a little bit of anti-aliasing to the edges of things, and it really kind of fouls you up when you're trying to just create a design that's just simple and pixel perfect. Well, Pixel Grid will help you solve that and allow you to create really, really precise selections. And one of the other things that works nicely with this tool, and just nicely in general, something I almost always turn on, under View, Show, are these Smart Guides, and these are a real winner. This is something that you're really going to enjoy here. Let me just drag out a shape and show you kind of what happens here. So I create this shape, and it's a hideous shape, whatever. It's just it's a rectangle. As I'm dragging it around, you can see I'm getting these guides that are popping up. In fact, that's showing me the horizontal center of my image, and then eventually I'll have one at some point that'll show me the vertical center of my image. But one of the cool things about this is, let's say I duplicate the shape, hold down the Alt or Option key and just drag this straight down, right? It's telling me how far off the top of the shape I'm dragging it, and then how far the sort of gutter is between the two shapes, so about 69 pixels there. But check this out, if I drag another copy of this out, I'm holding down Alt and Shift here, it tells me, look, here you go. You got both shapes now at exactly 69 pixels apart, and it gives you some snapping. It gives you some leeway there in terms of setting that up. And I could drag another one out, right? And bing, whoop, I messed that up. But see, I can just adjust it, pull it down a little bit. See, if I move it over here, I can, number one, snap just side to side, so it snaps in line with my other shapes. And right there, 69 pixels between all four of my shapes. So Smart Guides. It is so insanely useful. All right, there we go. There's our vertical center. There's our horizontal center. So we've created these shapes. We've aligned them all nicely, and we've aligned them perfectly to even the center of our document. Smart Guides. They are a must-have. Although some people do find them to be annoying when all of the little, little pink lines or whatever color you set in preferences, when all those lines keep appearing. But hey, if it works for you, it works. Go with it. I want to leave you here with one bonus tip, one bonus favorite thing that I have in Photoshop, and it's just a big time saver. When you close Photoshop and you have a bunch of open documents, maybe you've just opened a bunch of images to preview them, and Photoshop sometimes will prompt you, depending on the file type and if you've gone in and actually done anything, Photoshop's going to prompt you, hey, would you like to save this document? And let's say you have 30 documents open in Photoshop. Every single one of them you're going to say, no, don't save, don't save, don't save, don't save. But if you use the Close All command, check this out. So I have all these images open, and a few of them I've made changes to. In fact, all of the images up to where we are I've made changes to. In fact, just to make it fair, I'm going to just make some changes to this image here. Boom, a big blob of red. All right, so we've got all these images that changes have been made to, and we want to close things. So if we just directly close Photoshop, it takes a long time. But if we go File and choose Close All, we have this little Apply to All checkbox. Highly underrated, and it's a great time-saving feature in Photoshop. One of my personal favorites, because there's nothing that's more annoying than having to sit here and click Don't Save 35 times in a row because you don't want to save any of these images that you've created. So I'm going to choose Apply to All, choose Don't Save, and give it a second. Voila, gone, done, out of the way. All right, well, it took a little while to go through the best of the best because I wanted to kind of explain a little bit along the way how to use each of those features a little bit. But like I said, where I've done tutorials, I'm going to try to link those tutorials in that part of the video up in, kind of this corner of the video. You'll see a little white circle appear. You can click on that and check out those tutorials. Now I want to talk about the 10 worst features in Photoshop. And again, if I've done tutorials on any of these, I'll also include the link up in the corner when I get to that point. Hey guys, wait a second. Before we go any further, I want to just let you know I'm selling a course over on tutvid.com all about how to retouch images. if you're interested, if you've stuck around this far, I really appreciate it, and maybe you would be interested. You can see right up here, there's going to be a little link that appears that will take you over where you can pick up this course. You can check out all the details about the course. It's about how to retouch images and gets into quite a bit of detail on a whole ton of different kinds of images. Just check it out. You don't have to buy it. Just check it out. See if it's for you, and if it is, and you pick up a copy at supportstutvid.com, and that's amazing. Thank you. Let's get back to the tutorial. Now, the first thing I want to talk about here are just the default styles, swatches, like gradient swatches, things like that in Photoshop. Whoever designed these, they are truly awful. There's some like film action presets in the styles panel. I mean, if we look here under styles, some just truly awful styles that really have no business being in Photoshop anymore. It's not the mid-90s any longer. Who uses this stuff? The only thing that this does is when a new designer or a new Photoshop user happens upon this in Photoshop, they say, ooh, this is really cool. I don't know how they do this. And they think that going and applying, a style like this is actually a good-looking piece of art, or let's undo that, maybe something like that. Yeah, that's a winner right there. I'll tell you what, you're going to win some graphic design contests with that. How about that? Oh, yes. So just generally, the default styles, and even in the gradients panel, the default gradients, they're just kind of lackluster. There are a few good ones, but for the most part, if I can get the styles panel to click back into place, but for the most part, it's just really, really bad, really ugly, very unusable stuff. Photoshop, it's not Photoshop version, or Adobe, it's not Photoshop version 4 anymore. We could use an update in terms of like the default styles and everything. The stroke layer style, however, no longer defaults to the color red, so that is an improvement. One of the other things, speaking of layer styles, is the idea that we have non-scaling layer styles. So let's just check this out. If I create here a shape, and I'm going to give it no stroke, and I'm just going to make it light blue. All right, so I have a square that I draw out right here in the middle of my document. You can see it's up on a new layer. Great. I can go layer style, choose blending options. And I look through here, there's some scaling options. Nope, don't see any scaling options. Let's go ahead and just apply a stroke to this. So we're going to go stroke, and I'm going to set the size to 15 pixels, and I'm going to choose inside. Oh, this is actually another side note here. The outside positioning, you will never be able to get squared corners, or as of Photoshop CC 2015.5, no ability to get squared corners. In fact, let's go ahead and overprint. Nope, doesn't help. Positioning center, nope, doesn't help. What's the only way to get square, sharp corners is to go inside, which means, again, if you're working with a pixel perfect, very precise layout, you need to account for 15 pixels of stroke on either side of your shape and make your original shape 30 pixels wider and 30 pixels taller to account for a stroke, which you want to have perfectly sharp corners. You have Adobe Illustrator where you can choose the end cap, whether or not you want it to be mitered, rounded, or a straight point. I don't know why they don't have that feature in Photoshop. It's a little annoying. But anyway, that's not even the most annoying thing. Check this out. Let's set the size, now that I'm thinking about it, to something like 30, which wants to be a little bit bigger. And let's go with something hideous. Let's go back to the default, or it's not quite default red, but just red, make it really, really nasty looking. All right, now we take this shape and we decide, you know what, I need to make this shape bigger. So we're going to go Command or Control T to free transform, and I'm just going to scale this image up much, much larger. Well, as I scale the image up, my stroke does not scale with the layer, which is pretty annoying. What I have to do is I need to look up in my free transform panel and see, okay, 232.99, basically 233% on the width and height. So I can go ahead and hit check, and then with this layer still selected, I need to go layer, this is no joke here, layer, layer style, scale effects, and choose to scale them 233%, and then I can hit OK, and there my stroke has scaled up to the size of the shape which I have just transformed. It would be nice to have something we could tick on, like in the blending options dialog box or something that allows our blending, our layer styles to scale with the artwork which we're scaling. It could be a big time saver. All right, so let's delete that and let's move on to the next thing here, which is, oh, tell me you haven't fallen in love with the magnetic lasso tool. And there's so many different features up here, from frequency and contrast and width and everything else. Honestly, I've used the magnetic lasso tool about 2 or 3 times, and I hated it every time. And I can't even tell you with good conscience, I know what all of these little features up in the control bar do. I could take a guess at them, but it's just an awful tool. The idea is that it's automatically going to stick to the edges of whatever you're drawing around. But I mean, look at this. It doesn't even get a clean selection around this guy, and it's just really crappy. So I'm just going to hold down my Command or Control key as I just did and click, and it completes the selection. It's absolute garbage. So the magnetic lasso tool, it's just a terrible feature in Photoshop. It's an awful tool, something that needs to go far, far away. Next up, we have the content-aware move tool. Now, this is a fancy tool that's been introduced. It's actually somewhat newer, but let's just, basically the way it's supposed to work is you draw a selection around something and you drag it, and it's going to copy that selection and sort of help blend it into place. So, and this is maybe an unfair image to use because it's going to be a tough image for Photoshop to do much with, but let's just put this tool through its paces. Say I make a selection around this guy, and then I click and drag him over, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key, keep it nice and level, and let's let go, and you can see here it's going to analyze, remove some stuff. Let's see if it finds the edge of his jacket. No. So what it's done is it has moved him entirely over to the edge. It's chopped out a big front portion of the desk. There's some blurry stuff. The color doesn't really match up correctly. The color doesn't match on the background either. It's extra noisy. It's more grainy than the original image was. And just generally, and the front edge over here where it's supposed to meet just looks really bad. Now, again, I didn't copy the front edge of the table, so, I'll give Photoshop a break for that. But, I mean, here, it's even the gray is not blended in well over here around his hair. Content-aware move. I've played around a lot with this. I've done an entire tutorial on this tool. It's just a bad feature in Photoshop. It doesn't work right. The idea is solid, but the execution is pretty atrocious. It's just not that good. Now, one of the other things that is really annoying in Photoshop is when you have all of your open images consolidated up here as tabs, sometimes you may want to, let's say, move the O image over here in place of the N image, in which case you can click and drag it and pop, it'll move into place. But then if you use the hotkey Control-Tab to move to the next image, it doesn't move to the next image in line. It moves to the next image like as was chronologically opened. And then if I go Control-Tab again, it's going to jump back to O because O is technically after M. So it would be nice if this was just kind of like automatically visually detected and whatever the visual order you place these tabs in would work. The other thing that's annoying is if you, as you're dragging, you need to hover straight over the tabs. If you move the document out here, it breaks the image out of the tab, and when you put it back in the tab, it automatically snaps right to the end. So that's just super duper annoying. There we go. I dragged it back into place. The only real solution I've found for this is just learn to use your mouse really well and be careful with where you're dragging. It's annoying. It's not perfect. Maybe Photoshop can find a creative solution to that because I kind of understand why it works the way it works, but it leaves a bit to be desired as well. Now, one of the other annoying things in Photoshop is the Browse and Bridge button located under File, Browse and Bridge. I don't know if you ever accidentally clicked this button. Bridge has a lot of detractors, people that absolutely hate Bridge. I appreciate Bridge for the couple things it does well, but it's such a bloated, fat program now. They did kind of trim it down a little bit, but it's so slow. And if you accidentally open Browse and Bridge, particularly if it opens to a folder full of video files or something like that, it's incredibly slow. So a couple solutions to avoid this are, number one, get a faster computer, or number two, somewhat cheaper, is go Edit Menus, and you can go to File and Browse and Bridge. You can just tick the visibility off, hit OK, and under File, it's no longer there for you to accidentally hit. So that's super cool. One of the other annoying things is there's still no really great way to measure in Photoshop. The rectangular marquee tool is so fast and so easy. You can drag out a big selection and you can see, okay, your little tooltip says that that's a width of about 1300 or 1400 pixels, right? 1390, something like that. And if you leave a selection there, you can always open the info panel and see, all right, there's the width, 1397, and there's the height if I'm interested in getting the height. Now, the reason, and maybe you're screaming at your computer, oh, come on, idiot, there is a ruler tool. And yes, there is a ruler tool. I can measure like the width of his glasses here, right, and say, hey, those are 621 pixels across. The problem with the ruler tool is while it works for smaller objects like this, I'm going to clear the ruler, sometimes you're looking to check the distance between a few square objects or maybe a couple pieces of a UI that you've created, and having that long edge of the rectangular marquee tool that you can drag against your UI element and then dragging it over against another piece of UI element. Let's say you have a big text box here and a big text box over here. It can be really helpful to just get things lined up, and it's just so fast and easy. I mean, the rectangular marquee tool, boom, it's right there, and you just drag it out, get the selection you need. There you go, 2075 pixels, I'm on my way. It's so fast and easy. So the fact that that's still the best and the fastest way to create a selection in Photoshop, something's not right about that. The ruler tool needs to be updated. It needs to be upgraded. I have an entire tutorial I did on the ruler tool, but it needs some help. Oh, and I should also mention that when you're using the rectangular marquee tool, if it's not outputting pixels as a unit of measure, one of the ways you can change that really quickly, of course, you can go to the unit of measures area of preferences, but you can also just bring up the rulers, Command or Control R, and right-click on the ruler and choose whatever unit of measure you want to see. So right now mine is set to pixels, so that's what I'm getting. Command or Control R to hide those rulers, that is, and they go away. So that's just a quick way to change the unit of measure you're viewing. All right, let's go over here to the next image. Copy CSS. Up here under, where is it? I don't even know where. Oh, it's under Layer, right? Yeah, Layer, Copy CSS. So the idea behind Copy CSS, I'm not even going to demo it because it's awful. It is atrocious. I've done an entire tutorial on it where I take the code, I bring it into Dreamweaver, which isn't the greatest editor I get. But I take it into Dreamweaver and we try to make this button in Photoshop and then bring it over and have all the CSS placed into this bit of HTML code for us. The CSS is dismal. It doesn't give you exactly what you see in Photoshop, and it's just really badly written code. I mean, really badly written code. It's messy, it's bloated, it's just terrible. And Photoshop for a long time has been bad at writing code. Heck, Dreamweaver doesn't even write great code, and that's Adobe's HTML editor. So you know you got a problem when you're coming into Photoshop and trying to copy CSS out of it. It's still something that I feel like has some promise. There's got to be a way to make it work. There has to be a way to make this kind of feature work. But right now, it just flat out doesn't. It's a terrible feature. It's awful. Again, I've done a tutorial on this feature where we test it out. We kind of play around with it, see what we can do, get the best that we can with it. But all things considered, a truly awful feature, Copy CSS. So one of the things that kind of annoyed me when Photoshop was updated, I believe it was Photoshop CC 2015, when they initially updated to that, was they moved the Save for Web and Devices, which just originally was Save for Web a long time ago, down here under Export, Save for Web Legacy. And it's got this really, like, you feel like you're playing Twister with your fingers to get the hotkey Command Shift Option S, Control Shift Alt S on the PC, which is, it's great having a hotkey, but it's a difficult hotkey and you're buried, 2 menus deep. And a lot of times Save for Web is what you're going to use when you just want to save out a file that's, small and optimized as best as possible. Save for Web. I still use it over Export As a lot of the time, just because it's so fast and it's so easy and it's just there and it's got, it's just an easy, a hotkey that I've memorized. It's not necessarily an easy hotkey to get with your fingers until you've stretched them out. So I wish there was an easier way to just do like this whole Save for Web thing. I know Export As is there, but Save for Web is it's the original. It's the legacy version. It's the way that I prefer doing it. I wish there was a way to move this menu item out of the submenu and back over to here. That would be great. Of course, you can always go edit down here to keyboard shortcuts and choose a new keyboard shortcut, but it would be great if there was a way as well to just move the button back up here. So if there was a way to get Save for Web, boom, back out here, that would be incredible. Now, one of the other things that Photoshop is truly awful at is UI design. It's a terrible tool for like web-facing graphic designers, people who are doing UI design, maybe you're doing app development. I know they've introduced artboards and all kinds of other things, but it's still a terrible tool for designing UI. It's just not made for it. A tool like Sketch, there's a lot of people that love that and use it, and it's very effective, it's fast, it's lightweight, it's everything that it should be, and everything certainly that Photoshop is not in the UI realm. Now, Adobe seems to, they seem to understand that, and they've created a new tool here. It's called Adobe XD. In fact, I'm going to bring it up if I can here. There we go. Adobe XD, Adobe Experience Design CC, and you basically, you create UIs, you create websites, anything like that. You can choose a device to work on. Let's just go with 1920 by 1080. You can see we've got our little document here, and you draw shapes. You've got your pen tool, you've got text, you've got lines, and it's just very precise, right? It's very perfect. You move this here, and then one of the cool things you can do is you can draw out a repeating grid, and you can just repeat this time and time, to the left or to the right, and then up and down, and you've got all these shapes just like that you've created, right? You can't do that in Photoshop. There's all kinds of different things as far as exactly positioning the X and Y coordinates, adjusting the width and height, rotation, a lot of things that you can do in here that are very clunky, not nearly as smooth, not nearly as fast. This is so lightweight, it's so fast. You feel like you're working in like a true wireframe type application. Adobe XD. If you haven't checked it out, you should check it out. If you have a Creative Cloud subscription, I believe currently it's free to anybody who has any kind of Creative Cloud subscription. I may be wrong about that. It might only be for the full subscribers, but I think it's free for pretty much anybody. Adobe XD, if you're doing UI, web design, mobile apps, anything like that, you gotta check it out. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this little application. I'm gonna close it for now. Nope, don't need to save it. In fact, I'll just close the whole thing. Now, one of the other things in Photoshop that I really don't like is, and actually this was echoed to me by somebody on Twitter, it was funny, the implementation of actions in Photoshop, very clunky. It just feels very archaic. Here I'm going to open up the Actions panel under Window Actions, and you can see it's just this stack of folders, and in order to actually execute an action, you have to open up the Actions folder, you have to select the action, and you have to hit the play button. And then you get the action, and it does its thing, and there we go. We have an action that's applied. Now, you can flip it over into button mode, and when you flip it to button mode, all you have to do is, click once on the button, and bam, it runs the action, which, of course, yes, is much faster and a little bit easier than having to go open up a folder and do all of that rigmarole for your, in order, I should say, in order to run your action. Here I am stumbling over my words. That's how confusing it is, though. I can't even describe it. So I wish there was a way to, number one, make it look a little bit nicer, and just make it actually work a little bit better than it does, because it's just kind of a pain in the neck. So, the Actions panel UI, I don't know, just general complaints about the Actions panel UI. And I should also give you a double bonus. That was a bonus. That was the 11th worst thing about Photoshop. Another thing that's really annoying, if I just close all of my files here in Photoshop, just close all here, and I'll go with my Apply All feature that we discussed earlier. I really don't like this new opening scene in Photoshop, this new start area or whatever they call it. I'm going to open up my preferences here, and under General, you can shut this off. See this Show Start Workspace when no documents are open? I want to shut that off. Hit OK, and then you'd have to restart Photoshop, and when you restart Photoshop, you will have just the classic blank canvas looking area that you're accustomed to in Photoshop. So this is basically it. This is it for Photoshop. Well, not it for Photoshop. It's not it for Photoshop. It's it for this tutorial talking about the 10 best and 10 worst things in Photoshop. We discussed 11 things that I love about Photoshop, 12 things that I really don't like about Photoshop. And I mean, they're not crazy serious things. There's ways to work around all of them, but they're definitely probably the worst of the worst things in Photoshop. But hey, it could be a lot worse, couldn't it? So there's a lot I think we take for granted with Photoshop. But yeah, a lot of great stuff, a lot of bad stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you check out the rest of my videos. Thank you so much for watching. And for the 10 best and 10 worst features in Photoshop, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. NathanielDodsonTutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.
Today's moment of brilliance is brought to us by Confucius. He says, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. Sometimes it just takes doing it before we actually understand why or how something works, which is all the more reason to just jump into that project you're scared of. Go ahead and do that thing you think is impossible, because once you actually do it, you're going to understand how it all works, and you're going to want to do it over and over and over again. It's a beautiful thing. Go ahead and hit the like button for this video. Also, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and also up here in the corner, right up there, you can sign up for my newsletter. And when you sign up for my newsletter, I send you a free course, 30 tips and tricks on how to work with Photoshop so much faster, and much more effectively, by the way. You can also follow me on Snapchat, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. Take it easy, guys.